In this video, I'm bringing you the top 10 tips and tricks for new and returning players in Diablo 3. The first tip is whenever you're playing Diablo 3, you should always play seasonal. You should always make a seasonal character because this is where majority of players are playing. Seasons also include the developer's newest additions to the game, so there'll be increased power creep and new content. And you can always follow the seasonal journey and do the first 4 chapters to get a free 6-piece bonus for any class. Tip number 2, always follow a build guide. Now, if you're looking for a push build, it's okay to use the leaderboards and copy this. But for the main part of this game, you want to spend it farming, i.e. you want a farming build. The build I'm wearing here is not a build you would find on the leaderboards. It is a build specifically designed for speed farming content. One of the best ways is of course either YouTube like this, or you can go on maxroll.gg. If you go on maxroll.gg, you can find a ton of guides. You can also find tier lists for specific stuff. The solo experience tier list is where you want to look at first. These builds here are the bread and butter for the game because they are linked to greater rift farming. On the variants, you will find DR speeds, and this is the primary build you want to spend most of the time in when you're speed farming greater rifts. You can of course also make their Nephilim rifts and their bounty build, and they also have greater rift solo pushing build. But make sure you are using a speed build for speed farming. Tip number 3, stat priority. When you are comparing 2 items you have found, you always want to make sure you have the correct item, i.e. the one from the build guide. It doesn't matter if the game is technically telling you it's an upgrade with the plus green numbers. You need to make sure that it's the correct item that matches for that build. Second of all is the correct stats. So the build guide will for instance tell you what you want on every single item. For instance, if I compared these 2 amulets here, it would tell me that the Traveler's Pledge is technically better because of the plus 8.6% damage increase. This would however be a massive mistake, that this would not complement my build in any sort of way. Another thing to look at is elemental damage. When you open up your details, you can find a thing called physical damage increase. Now you see this because I have physical damage increase on my gear. I have it on my braces and on my amulet. And I have these specifically because my build guide told me, and therefore I want physical damage on as many items as I can. Tip number 4, learning the Kanai's cube. Kanai's cube is filled with 10 different pages with amazing recipes. These recipes here can power your character immensely and also give you a ton of power in a much shorter time. So make sure you find a guide telling you how to use these. Specifically, the first 4 pages are amazing throughout the entire game, as you can add extra powers, making your character stronger, and you can also make gear faster and better using the recipes here. Tip number 5, efficiency. Diablo 3 is an APRG and it's all about farming. You want to farm paragon and you want to farm gear to make your character stronger. This means you want to run content that is fast. You of course also want to do it as high as you can to get more XP per hour, but it's very important you also keep them fast. I would normally suggest doing greater rifts and rifts in under 3 minutes. No matter how far you are into the game, keep them short, fast and efficient, as this will guarantee you the most XP power and also loot power. Tip number 6, augment your gear. If you go to the stats on this item, you can see there is a plus 625 strength from a Carl the Sun's Despair rank 125. This is what we call augmenting. It is a way to add increased power to your items and get more main stat. You can see here on recipe 10 Kanai's cube, it requires an ancient item, it requires a legendary gem, and requires 3 gems. So that means I could take any of these legendary gems here, combine it with 3 of these gems, and then put on an augment. Now a new thing they've also added is Whispers of Atonement. You get these from Echo Nightmares, but that's an entire video by itself. But if you combine 3 legendary gems, a Whisper of Atonement, this could also be a legendary gem for that matter, and an ancient or primal item, you can then transmute it, and that will give plus 125 main stat, which is an exceptionally good way to power your character even further. Tip number 7 is Elective Mode. As you can see on the defensive on my skills, I have both Sprint and Ignore Pain selected within the same bracket. Without this Elective Mode, you could not do this. It would allow you to only take 1 from each of these categories. And of course, sometimes your build requires multiple. So make sure you go into options, go gameplay, and put on Elective Mode. This will also allow you to move around your spells as much as you want to and place them in different spots, depending on where you're more comfortable with that key binding. The next thing we're going to talk about is Puzzle Rings. These are rings you can use and then come into the vault. In here, you can get a ton of gold and also gems. It's one of the best ways early game when you're just starting out to get a ton of material, gold, and you can also equip a broken crown, which will then make your gems drop even more. And you of course need these gems to augment your gear. Tip number 9 is force move. Now in Diablo 3, in order to move, you of course have to click around. It's a click to move game. But once in a while, you might try and click to move, but there might be an enemy standing where you're clicking and you are then auto-tagging instead of moving. We can get around this by going to options, going to keybinds, and then going to gameplay. Find the one called force move and either bind it to something like your scroll wheel or spacebar. By force moving, we are now just moving instead of actually using a spell. And this will allow you to move through an enemy and not click it and attack it instead. And tip number 10, make sure to level your legendary gems and do some semi pushes and some real pushes. Your legendary gems are a massive power to your character, so make sure you level these and get them as high as possible. As I mentioned earlier, you want to spend majority of your time doing speed farming. That is a lower level grade that you can do in under 3 minutes. But once in a while, you want to level your legendary gems. That means either going to some that take 5 minutes, 6 minutes, or even up to 10 or 15 minutes. Because you want to make sure you level these. Because if you notice here, I'm upgrading a gem that has a 0% chance to upgrade because I'm doing a level that is too low compared to the gem level. And for a bonus tip, as a quick way to spend paragon is using ctrl and shift. So instead of clicking in 1 point at a time, you can either use shift and do 10 points or even control and use 100 points at once. If this video was useful or informative, all you gotta do is hit that like button as it really helps out the channel. And I'll see you in the next video.